what happens if the truly archaic ideas are allowed to just essentially flourish on their own, and what you get is this giant evil empire, and it's quite magnificent in a way.
Yeah, right.
It's demonic, but it's also kind of dark majesty that it has.
Because in all sorts of ways, the Romans are like an evil empire. You can make that argument. If you're on the other side of the ledger to them, they would seem completely demonic.
Well, who was it that said they make a desert and call it peace? Was it Josephus or something?
Yeah, who said that? It's a very famous line, isn't
it? Was a Roman.
I can't remember who said it.
Who said it? Because they were like, we're kind of evil.
Yeah, we the baddies. Was it Tacitus? I can't remember who said it.
I thought it was Josephus in the Jewish.
It might be. But, I can't remember. It's such a famous quote. I should know off the top of my head.
It's one of those things that you should know where it comes from.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at it from the Gallic perspective. If a third of Gaul has been murdered and a third enslaved and a third colonized, essentially out of existence, it's hard to not see them as like a tyrannical evil empire. It's a fair assessment. And the Assyrians essentially are very much the same, actually.
Yeah, the Assyrians and the Romans. Also, all based on a lot of it based on slavery as well to prop it up. So there's also that element to it. We've said before, there's actually all different degrees or stripes of severity of slavery. And this and the Romans, it's a pretty bad one.
Yeah,
it's sort of it's not a light touch indentured type slavery, serfdom type thing. It's full blown often. Well, the full blown slavery.
Yeah. Okay. So let's. It depends who you are and what time period you live in, right? Because a lot of the early Assyrian Empire was essentially just a giant organized mafia, where this big army of farmers who have picked up weapons would come along to your city and say, "Give us money, and if you don't give us money, we're going to sack your city." And so a lot of it was just tributary, really. So they wouldn't even have had direct governance over places. But that doesn't persist, and then it does take on the sort of administrative state that Rome develops as well. So it depends when, and you could be a subject people that just has to pay taxes and supply 10,000 men or something, and it's not the end of the world. But you could be literally taken off into bondage if you told them no, because the Assyrians didn't take no for an answer.
And also, people that know their stuff out there might roll their eyes at what I just said, especially about the Romans, because there are many degrees of it. Oh, yeah. You could be working in the salt mines of Numidia as a slave.
You could be a tutor to an aristocrat's son.
Exactly. Yeah. But you're treated very, very well, actually. Yeah. And then you get your freedom. Because
you earned it.
And then you have a private fortune of your own, and on and on and on. So slavery could be very, very light touch in the Roman world. Depends where you were at what time and all sorts of things. So just to make that clear, I am aware. Yeah.
But it's probably not fun for most people.
Right, yeah. Well, that was the thing. A lot of the time, especially out in the provinces. What was the big island? Was it Cyprus or... not Cyprus. There was one massive slaver island the Romans had. Anyway,
Sicily or Crete, is it?
I think it was Crete.
Right.
The whole thing was like a hub for slaving.
Right.
And that some descriptions of that seem hellish.
So there was a massive slave revolt in Sicily as well. Right. So there must have been loads of slaves in Sicily. So yeah.
But we're getting off the point slightly. Just to go back to the Assyrians specifically, I want to place them in their time. So to begin with, it's sort of the pre-Bronze Age collapse.
Yes.
Which is roughly somewhere between 1200 and 1150 BC. Somewhere around then, we get the Sea Peoples and we see the Bronze Age collapse and that whole thing. And they straddle both sides of it. Yeah. So I want to say that first.
Yeah. No, this is a great point, because from the sort of collapse of the Akkadian Empire about 2000 BC to about 1100 BC, the Assyrians have a contiguous civilization. It's not very important. It's like a minor regional kingdom.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is intact and it lasts. It's as I said, contiguous. It's not interrupted by a foreign invasion or anything like this. And the Assyrians are competing with, just as a very brief overview of the Bronze Age civilizations, you have what they call like giant palace civilizations. So it's a very centralized bureaucratic civilization around the divine king and his essentially resource accumulation in the palace. And we see this in like Egypt, Hattusha, Assyria, Babylon, Crete in the Minoans, and probably something similar in the Mycenaean areas of Greece, and for reasons that historians are still divided over, but I'm pretty convinced. I'm certain it's just going to be some sort of the Dorian invasions or something like this.
The sea peoples.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, look,
They seem to have come from the west.
if
We've got a whole epochs in this, haven't we?
we do. Ramses the Third is it's conspiracy in their isles. Well, it's the Aegean Sea, so it's a bunch of warrior Greeks, and I think that the Iliad is basically the cultural memory that the Greeks have of taking part in these things, but they essentially ravaged everything within range and destroyed civilizations. And the only civilizations, just to very, very briefly rush you through the Bronze Age collapse, there's a very advanced, prior to this, there's a very advanced economic set of economic activity going on. There's lots of trade in copper and textiles and things like this that goes, copper and tin and textiles, that goes from Britain, Afghanistan to the Middle East, bringing these resources across this entire area. And this is where the invention of writing comes from, is to make sure that we keep track of things like that. And so you get a level of civilization that starts growing up, and it seems that whatever we're going to call the Proto-Greeks are barbarian raiders, pirates at this point, and have hit on a technology that allows them to do this. Now, you've seen the Mycenaean armor. I can't remember I can't remember what it's called, the panoply.
Well, it looks like a Ned Kelly type thing.
Where it's literally bands of bronze. I'm sure we can get a picture up in post. But this seems like a remarkable innovation in armor, and it probably worked really well, actually, in the Bronze Age. And I'm guessing it was this armor that allowed them to conduct terrifying raids and destroy, literally, because if the archaeology shows that the entire sort of eastern or western seaboard of the Middle East, the eastern seaboard of the Mediterranean, it's just burned down just over the course of like 100 years. And the only civilizations that seem to have resisted this are the Egyptians and the Assyrians. And the Assyrians, probably because they're too far away to be able to sail over and give them hell. So fortunately, their geography saved them there. But the Egyptians actually seem to have defeated them in battle under Ramses III, I think it was. Yeah. So this leads to a wide-scale economic collapse and the sort of new Dark Age. And it's out of this Dark Age that classical civilization in the West appears, but the Assyrians survive this Dark Age. They're one of the few cultures to do so. And actually, it turns out that a massive vacuum of power, because we should do epochs at some point on the Hittites, because they're another terrifying civilization. They're a terrifying civilization. Who have got very much the Assyrian ethos towards life and war and conquest, because everyone did. Everyone had the same ethos. So the Assyrians, for their time, weren't anything remarkable. They were really the ones that just were fortunate enough to be well placed to deal with it, it seems. Have I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all of that right. We just don't know who the Sea Peoples were. It's more than one people. The Egyptians say it was 7 peoples. They do seem to have come from the West. It's a totally good call to say they may well have been Greek.
Not just Greek, as I say. Right, it's going to be a coalition of barbarian tribes that have come down, probably from the north, arrived in Greece, and realised that actually this is a great staging point to raid the vast and wealthy civilizations of the East. Because it was.
Right, yeah. But whoever they were sort of apocalyptic in the totality of the destruction they wrought. Yeah. The archaeology just sees almost everything is laid waste. Yeah. It's crazy.
Totally ruthless.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to give the Hittites short shrift here, because the Hittites were a massive and professional empire. They had phenomenally good soldiers. They had an incredible military tradition in the Hittite Empire. So if the Sea Peoples can trash them, they can trash anyone, basically.
Yeah, so the Hatti, the Hittites from modern day Turkey, had a fairly decent empire going on. It was
massive.
And that gets completely trashed.
Yeah. We've got archaeological records from the Hittites where they explain their military doctrines. For example, if you're a sergeant or some officer and you don't do as you're told, you get executed. Like, it's unbelievably strict. But that meant that their army was very, very, very good. But of course it had to be, because they had to compete with the Assyrians and the Egyptians and the whatever we're going to call the people living in Armenia at the time. You know, they're surrounded by great powers, basically.
Yeah. So the people surrounding the Assyrians were sort of, the Aramaeans, the Hittites, the Babylonians to their south. The Mushku are people, quite important big people called the Mushku, and the Egyptians. Obviously, the Egyptians were and the only ones that seem to survive this onslaught of the Sea Peoples, the Bronze Age collapse, seems to be the Egyptians by the skin of their teeth, and the Assyrians also by the skin of their teeth, though. Yeah. Even though they're a long way away, effectively, if sort of the epicenter of it was on the Levant, they're quite a long way from it, but they had a bit of an empire going on, and it totally shrinks. They have to turtle up, have to do everything they possibly can to just sort of weather it. Yeah. And they do just about.
And the thing as well, we've got to remind people is there is always the prospect of just random barbarian invasions. Like, this happens a lot to the Assyrians. I mean, it happened to the Akkadians. Why, just this random barbarian tribe turns up and they kill everyone. It's brilliant.
The Iranian mountains are still full of savages.
Yeah, but you can come down from the Caucasus as the Sumerians. And so it's like you've just got it's a very difficult area to survive in, because people can come from anywhere, and you don't want people coming from Central Asia to wherever you are, because the people in Central Asia are always awful, like not just barbaric but insanely tough. And this just, again, every single people that comes out of the cauldron of nations is just like iron. They're just beaten into the hardest and most unforgiving shape. And it's so, right, okay.
Like Scythians or Mongols.
Yeah, or the Sumerians or the Huns or whoever. It keeps happening, And it's, so when I'm like, the Assyrians were evil. For a given level of evil, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, they were evil for us in liberal democracies in England in the 21st century. But, I mean, there are times where the Assyrians are like the saviors of the Middle East. So, it's better the devil you know, I suppose.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.